Well, today we are looking a little bit more at industrialization and the labor movement in the United States. Look at a little more on the life of Andrew Carnegie. We've got the Homestead Strike, the Pullman Strike, National Labor Union, the Knights of Labor, Samuel L. Gompers and the American Federation of Labor, Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, John D. Rockefeller, the creation of trusts. Figure out what a trust is. As we get into the late 1800s, we get into an era called the Gilded Age. That phrase actually developed by the writer Mark Twain. He did more than just write novels about life on the Mississippi River. He is actually a profound social critic, critical of American interventionism abroad, critical of America's treatment of workers, so many others, and so many injustices in American life. One quote he was famous for saying was, probably exemplifies this era very well: if you rob a train, you go to jail. But if you steal a railroad, you go to Congress. Actually exemplifying the very unequal power that people had in this country. That is, if you are a captain of industry, you own this factory that is crushing the lives of thousands of people toiling in poverty, you're rewarded with fame and power and fortune. But if you stand up for yourself, say, I want a raise, then you're a troublemaker that needs to be put in jail. Question: name something benefit that you expect when you take a benefit you expect when you take a job, full-time job. Huh? Get paid. Yeah. Substantial hours. Is it enough hours to be able to pay the bills? What kind of insurance? Medical insurance. What else? Yeah.
Benefits.
Okay. Benefits such as medical, vacation,
time, sick time.
Christmas, holidays. Yeah.
If I work over 8 hours, I get my lunch.
Lunch break. Yeah, lunch breaks. That makes things like weekends.
Ooh.
I want a weekend off once in a while. But retirement, you want to be working when you're 80 or want to be sitting back on the beach somewhere? Retirement. What else? Okay, but a safe working environment. Like I say, everything that was named here did not exist for the average American worker in 1900. They all exist today because of labor unions. Every one of them. Retirement, 8-hour day, lunch breaks, vacation, weekends, paid holidays, or even just getting any holiday off, retirement, health insurance, dental insurance, workman's comp, safety in the workplace. Make sure that machinery you're working next to doesn't explode and leave you dead or crippled for life. Those basic standards you expect in the American workplace in 2016 exist because of labor unions. And these rights and benefits weren't given easily. Things like the Homestead Strike and the Pullman Strike. It wasn't just where you see just a couple guys standing in a corner drinking coffee carrying a sign saying unfair or UAW local on strike. There's nice airline pilots walking around an airport terminal saying on strike. These are wars. These are people got out 2x4s and shotguns, company hired thugs to machine gun women and children. All that, so you could have a weekend off, among other things. Now start off discussion with Andrew Carnegie. Very interesting figure. He's an immigrant from Scotland. Classic rags to riches stories in the United States. Came to the United States hardly a dime to his name. Extraordinarily poor. He started working the steel mills in Pennsylvania. Eventually, a little hard work, a little luck, worked his way to becoming a messenger and developed business connections from there. And see, as a messenger, remember this is the time before they had telephones, so if you want to get something from one company to another or from one part of the company to another, you had to send a messenger out. They would write a letter, quick note, they'd send it to the who they need there, the messenger waits for a reply, they come back, and while Carnegie's waiting for a reply, started talking to people. Chatting him up. They're impressed by him, they gave him eventually worked his way into an executive position, eventually worked his way up to owning his own steel mill. Stopped right there with an extraordinary success in the United States. But he kept going. Started buying out other steel mills, all his competitors. Started buying out coal mines. Coal basically being used to power the furnaces to make the steel. Before long, he came to dominate the entire steel industry. And in 1901, he sold all his steel holdings for $450 million. It's the equivalent of about $6-7 billion today. That's in addition to the cash he already had on hand. Extraordinarily wealthy. He also came renowned for his charitable works. As a young man in Scotland, he had wanted to borrow a book from a library, but the library wouldn't let him. He didn't have any money. So Carnegie gave a bunch of money to communities all over the country so they could establish free lending libraries. Carnegie Hall in New York, a great performance hall that was built by him with his own money. He once said, a man who dies wealthy dies a failure, is determined to give away all of his money. But how he got there, though, the labor policies of his own company precipitated one of the most violent strikes in American history, the Homestead Strike. In 1876, a group of Carnegie's employees had gotten together to organize a union called the Amalgamated Association of Steelworkers. Well, they'd won several impressive contracts, based on the idea of a labor organizing principle: united we stand, divided we fall. All the workers were coming together, asking for better pay, better working conditions. Well, Carnegie hired a right-hand man to basically run the company while he was in Scotland and around the world, a man named Henry Frick. Frick was, well, not a very nice man. Pretty much. And so he decided the union had to go, that these guys were being overpaid. And he was determined to break the union once and for all. He wasn't going to have the workers telling him what to do. So in 1892, as the contract the union was winding up, the company broke off negotiations for a new contract. and demanded they accept a pay cut. No reason. The company's doing fine. The company's making great profits. Just decided they're overpaid and they need a pay cut. Only reason. Well, the mill is located in a town called Homestead, Pennsylvania. It's a factory town basically built just for the Carnegie Steel Mill. That's the term Homestead strike from. So they go on strike, and Frick shuts down the entire plant and calls in 300 what are called Pinkerton guards. Now, they work for the Pinkerton Detective Agency, it's a famous private investigative firm. Also did security work on the side, basically bodyguards, and basically hired armies to break up strikes. So these 300 guards, private security guards, basically are hired to come in and break up the strike. They come in with armed rifles and shotguns against unarmed people. So on July 6, 1892, the Pinkerton Guards arrived and a pitched battle broke out. A riot ensued. The workers fought back, beating them with 2x4s, their bare hands. Some of them managed to run home and get revolvers and start shooting back. 3 Pinkerton Guards and 10 workers were killed. Many more were injured. Pinkerton Guards were forced to flee. At the company's request, the governor of Pennsylvania called in 8,000 National Guardsmen to break up the strike by force, and workers slowly went back to their jobs. The Union had to surrender, and the Union disintegrated in the recriminations afterward, arguing and infighting the Union, and the people blaming leadership over what happened. But the violence of the strike ended up turning many people against unions and the plight of workers in general. We go to the Pullman strike. It's in 1894. It's 2 years later. Involved the Pullman Palace Car Company. Owned by a man named George Pullman. And he also had a factory town set up called Pullman, Illinois. See a recurring theme here. Basically, to work for Pullman, you had to live in his company town. This little town, built and owned, everything is George Pullman. Everything's owned by him. He owns all the houses, all the shops, all the bars, everything. Basically, you went to work for Pullman, he owned you. He didn't pay you in cash money, he paid you in company scrip. You could only pay company rents for your house and at the company store. So you could never save enough money to be able to move or find another job. The rents are about 20-25% higher than in surrounding communities. So you had to live in his houses, pay his rents. Basically, everything you earned went back to him. Actually, he told you where to go, where to live, where to shop, where to go to church, who to vote for. They didn't have the secret ballot back then. Basically, they could tell you vote for this man or don't come to work the day after the election. Well, workers hate Pullman. They hated the regimentation, they hated the high rents. In the winter of 1893 to 94, Pullman ordered wages slashed by 25% and refused to reduce rents. Now what they're doing here, the Pullman Palace Car Company, is they build train cars. So not a big one, but these are private cars they're building. Fine dining cars, the private cars that the millionaires have when they're traveling around the country. They're building train cars. So the workers decide to do is they're going to go on strike. But it's not just the Pullman workers going on strike here in Illinois. They convinced the American Railway Union, a union of railroad workers, to go on strike with them in sympathy. Well, the American Railway Union is led by a man named Eugene Debs. Eugene Debs is a socialist union organizer, believing in the power of the workers. Basically, he wanted to create a socialist state in America where the government owned everything, especially one where the workers had rights of consideration. And the Pullman workers, they just looking for decent pay, decent benefits. They want to control their lives back. Well, the American Railway Union tells railroad companies all over the country, including Pullman, that they're not going to work any train that's pulling a Pullman car. That was a good portion of it. Actually, rail traffic is going to shut down across the country until Pullman meets with his workers and meets their demands. So within a few days in 1894, thousands of railroad workers are on strike in 27 states and territories. Transportation throughout the West is paralyzed. The governor of Illinois is sympathetic to the workers, thinking that Pullman needs to sit down and negotiate with them. They do have legitimate grievances. But Pullman knows the Illinois governor's not going to break up the strike. So he bypasses the governor and goes straight to the President of the United States, Grover Cleveland. It says, because these train cars are also pulling the United States mail, they're interfering with the delivery of the mail, which is a federal crime. And therefore need to send in the Army to break up the strike. So July 1894, Cleveland sends in 2,000 federal troops to put down the strike. Federal court ordered the strike to end, but Debs and other leaders defied the order. Well, these union leaders were arrested, and federal troops protected the hiring of new workers, which caused the strike to collapse. Basically, once that court order came through and those men arrested, all these companies told their workers either go back to work or you're fired. So thousands of people were fired and took the Army to maintain order of the hiring of other employees. Now, through the 1800s, unions never included more than 2% of the U.S. workforce, or more than 10% of the industrial workforce. So unionism didn't catch on quite like it did in other countries, particularly in Europe. But because you have a lot of immigrant labor coming in from countries where labor unions are much more common, you have a lot more immigrant workers coming in and joining unions, which a lot of native-born Americans, it made the union seem kind of foreign and kind of radical. And it just seemed kind of out of step with the idea of individual American advancement. So it's often difficult to organize workers based on these impediments, but also because of ethnic divisions. Now, there are no civil rights laws yet. They can hire and fire somebody based on the color of their skin or their ethnic background. They can pay people different wages based on the color of their skin. That's completely legal. And company owners use this to divide the labor force. Like I said, whites who are generally paid more become very resentful of African American workers who are paid maybe about half the wages. Afraid the African American laborers are going to come and steal their jobs. But on top of that, you go to a plant, say a steel plant, you've got different job assignments. Workers are divided that way. Like say some guy molding the iron at the furnaces, he has a very different job from the guy loading the steel onto the docks. Like some guy says, well, I'm happy with my job, happy with my benefits, this is the same job, no, I'm not joining the union. Or the clerk's doing the paperwork. Very different jobs, very different pay scales, very different conditions. And also you have fierce opposition from employers. Remember, First Amendment guarantees the freedom of assembly. But you're talking to men who own companies where they can hire their own armies. They can fire people for any reason they want. It doesn't have to be a reason that makes sense. A U.S. Steel executive once explained his feelings about unions. Quote, I've always had one rule. If a worker sticks up his head, hit it. Actually beat them back into line. Employers would use violence, blacklists, and firings to keep workers from organizing. Basically, they see you talking to a union organizer, you get fired on the spot. You attend a union meeting. Just attending a meeting, you'd be fired for that. Your cousin works at the plant. He attends a union meeting. You could be fired just for that, being related to somebody. And the possibility of being fired is usually enough to keep a worker in line, a worker desperate to feed a family on a very meager salary. Now, unions emerged very slowly in the United States. You have associations of workers organizing as early as the 1790s, but in the 1830s, started to become more prominent, these local unions called workingmen's societies. Initially just mutual aid societies. Basically, you pay your dues in, and it works like an insurance system. One of the members is sick or injured on the job, well, they take some of the dues and help pay the guy's bills while he's recovering. Or if the guy dies on the job, they help pay for the funeral. Because the company's not going to do that. And usually these workingmen's societies are organized along craft lines. If you're a carpenter, you belong to the carpenter's craft society. So they emerged, but they often quickly disappeared. And early unions are usually very localized. It's basically organized per plant. But as the economy starts becoming more national in scale, so do unions. For example, 1866, the National Labor Union. Organized in Pennsylvania by a man named William H. Silvis. Actually, he's an iron molder, works at the steel plants. He united several smaller unions, dotting Pennsylvania in the Northeast, into the National Labor Union. Now, he sought humanitarian reforms. Basically, he's not so much interested in changing the way the company works, but how the workers live. Got a bunch of other things, establishing workers' cooperatives as worker-owned shops. They all get a share of the profits of it. They all shop there. They don't have to. Except they can usually, hopefully, cheaper than a company store. Rather than working for specific issues. Remember that old country song, Sold Not Sold at the Company Store? 1920s, 1930s, we get that phrase from. National Labor Union at its peak attracted 640,000 members across the United States. But Silvis died in 1870, and the union died with him. Well, this time, there are no standards for labor existing. Workers work 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day. You're paid maybe 10 to 20 cents an hour in many industries. No safety regulations exist. Deaths and mutilations on the job are common. No compensation except for those maimed in accidents. People would never be able to work again. They'd have to basically live in poverty. No retirement. The workers began to realize that simply one worker usually illiterate, exhausted, and living in poverty, didn't have much a chance against the multi-millionaire plant owner. So that guy walks in, hat in his hand, and says, "Well, sir, I've done a good job for you for many years, and wondering if I could have a raise." Well, what's the boss going to say? Probably you're fired. Go to the door, hit you on the way out. But this one guy realizes 1,000 guys all getting together going to the boss saying, "We've made a lot of money for you, sir. We'd like a raise." That's going to get his attention. So therein, the union is born. Or you can be fired for no reason at all if you're blacklisted. Basically, your name's sent to other plants all over. You can never work in that industry again. Yeah, you can change your name, change your identity, but it'd probably be found out. So it's a lot easier to slip away and hide in those days than today, but still find you out. Education, training for another job, non-existent. Like I say, you didn't graduate high school and go to work in a plant the next day. Now, a lot of cases, you start working at that plant at 7, 8, 9 years old. So, college education like this, impossible. In fact, a lot of community colleges when it started after World War II. So they didn't have night school. They didn't have, say, if you had a skilled trade, that's the one you had for the rest of your life. You have to make a living off that. Workers had a little money to save since they worked subsistence wages. They could rarely afford to move to another city. It takes a lot of money to move. Especially if you want to move across the country. How are you going to do that? Can't afford a train ticket, barely afford your rent. Especially suppose you work for a company not even paying you real money, just monopoly money. Your company script, here, go shop at the company store. By the way, your rent's going up. They can't save that money because it's worthless outside the company town. Next thing, they couldn't start a farm. A lot of them work in factories are alive. They don't know anything about farming. But if the workers came together, a sizable portion of the plant, they could use their collective strength to make up for their individual weaknesses. They would withhold their labor if the demands were not met. Well, in 1869, a man named Uriah H. Stevens founded this organization. It's called the Noble and Holy Order of the Knights of Labor. Kind of a wordy name, but
What year?
1869, just as National Labor Union's about to go out. Originally, it's just a secret fraternal society. Basically, a bunch of guys get together to work, secret clubhouse, secret handshake, have a few beers, talk about work, that kind of thing. But very slowly in the 1870s until a new leader came along named Terence Powderly. 1878, he completely reorganized the union, the organization into a new union. 1879, the secrecy is ended. He starts an aggressive recruitment campaign. The union welcomed all laborers, regardless of race, color, sex, or creed. Unlike most unions, it organized female workers. At its height, included about 60,000 African American workers. It says unusual these workers are included because they can be paid so much less than white workers. They're terrified that allying with people who are paid less might mean that their own jobs, their own pay scales will be in jeopardy. These are guys barely getting by, and they're taking a big risk associating with somebody that the boss could easily set against them. Well, the idea, though, is to set the producers against the non-producers. Basically, trying to transform the economy not into one based on competition, but cooperation. So the producers, basically, company owners and their employees, the people who made things, the people who built things. The non-producers, those basically kind of the leech on society, the middleman. Non-producers included such people as bankers, gamblers, lawyers, liquor dealers. But powerfully discouraged strikes since employers and workers had common interests. Actually, and their demands were, let's see what their demands were. I see that here. This is the preamble and declaration of principles of the Knights of Labor of America, by Terence Powderly in 1878. Part philosophical, part concrete in there. Among other things here, saying the purpose of organizing and directing the power of the industrial masses, not as a political party, for it is more, in it are crystallized sentiments and measures for the benefit of the whole people, which should be borne in mind when exercising the right of suffrage, that is the right to vote. That most of the objects herein set forth can only be obtained through legislation. As the duty of all citizens to nominate supporting their votes such candidates who will pledge their support to those measures, regardless of party. So declare that our aims are to make individual moral worth, not wealth, the true standard of individual national greatness. Secure to the workers the full enjoyment of the wealth they create, sufficient leisure in which to develop their intellectual, moral, and social faculties. All the benefits, recreation, pleasures of association, in a word, enable them to share in the gains and honors of advancing civilization. What we're saying is, don't work a man so hard that he can't, that all he is the job. Or he comes home and he's so tired all he can do is sit there and stare at the wall all day. He can have time with his family, he can have time to join an organization, be part of the community, go to church, something like that. Such things are calling for the next page. The establishment of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that we may arrive at the correct knowledge of the educational, moral, and financial condition of laboring masses. Bureau of Labor Statistics, part of the Department of Labor, it's 1878 here. That was not established until 1930. In 35 years after this was asked for. And so they're asking for producers, that is all workers, including farmers, not just factory workers, some for the farmers in here too, that the public lands, the heritage of the people, be reserved for actual settlers. Now another acre for railroad or speculators, and all lands now held for speculative purposes be taxed to their full value. 6, the adoption of measures providing for the health and safety of those engaged in mining and manufacturing, building industries, and for the indemnification of those engaged therein for injuries received through lack of necessary safeguards. Workers' comp. Laws started emerging in some states slowly by the beginning of the 20th century, decades later. SSI, disability insurance for the federal government, doesn't start until the Social Security Act of 1935. Some states started establishing mining commissions. It is elected positions to oversee the condition, where the officials go in and oversee the conditions of mines. In Oklahoma, something similar called the Corporation Commission. Arkansas has a Department of Labor. Most other states have something similar to that. The recognition by incorporation of trades, unions, orders, and other such associations may be organized by the working masses to prove their condition and protect their rights. Basically, legal recognition of unions and rights for the unions. Basically, at this point, kind of depended on who was president. But rights for unions guaranteed under the law doesn't come onto the Wagner Act in 1935. Again, more than 50 years later. Enactment of laws compel corporations to pay their employees weekly in lawful money, not the monopoly money they're given out, for labor the preceding week. Well, you have to be paid regularly, it's the law, but whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, it depends on who you work for. Enactment of laws providing for arbitration between employers and employed, basically, National Labor Relations Act, 1935. Prohibition by law of the employment of children under 15 years of age in workshops, mines, and factories. Kids 10, 11, 12 years old, even younger than that, in factories and mines, very common in this time period. Child labor is not banned in the United States until 1938. 60 years later, it's still legal in some countries. Some countries still do employ sweatshop labor of little kids to manufacture shoes and clothing. Maybe some of what you're wearing now. This is still controversial today. Prohibit the hiring out of convict labor. That is, you've got guys who've worked hard their whole lives, who have no criminal record, but the job they could have is being taken up by axe murderers and rapists, basically sent out to do the work by the state instead. Arkansas is very notorious for this. 1890s, there's a problem of Arkansas basically taking convicts and making them work basically slave labor in the fields. No pay, no compensation, no saying what they did. Next saying the labor union saying, honest people need work too. Graduated income tax. Now, why are they talking about that? What's happening is you've got these millionaires who are making so much money that they can basically buy elections, afford their own armies, basically completely subvert the legal system of the United States. And what's the worker got? One vote. So the idea behind the graduated income tax was to make sure that you don't have a class system developing in the United States. We have this permanent underclass and this permanent overclass. There's some accountability. Income tax doesn't come along until 1913. And here, number 18. The government shall obtain possession by purchase under the right of eminent domain of all telegraphs, telephones, and railroads. Thereafter, no charter of license to be issued to any corporation or construction of or operation of any means of transportation, transporting intelligence, passengers, or freight. Basically, nationalizing the railroads. It's government takeover. Since a lot of these were monopolies already owned by one person, oversight, often saying, let's just have the government take it all over entirely. So at least there'd be some accountability to the people. Last page. Cooperative institutions which will tend to supersede the wage system. Basically, workers' co-ops. Number 20, secure for both sexes equal pay for equal work. Men and women receive the same salary. That wasn't law in the United States until 1963. Even to this day, women still make on average 78 cents for every dollar a man makes in the same position. Short hours of labor by general refusal to work more than 8 hours. 8-hour day doesn't come along until 1938. 40-hour work week. Seemed very reasonable to us today in many cases. Radical ideas in 1878. Now, Powderly once said about the Knights of Labor that said, quote, "The aim of the Knights of Labor, properly understood, is to make each man his own employer." Make each man his own employer. So membership grew rapidly. From 42,000 in 1882 to 110,000 by 1885. But in March 1885, the Union was forced to go on strike, something they always tried to avoid, but they had in this case against the Missouri Pacific Railroad. Won a stunning victory. So afterward, by the end of 1885, membership had soared to 730,000. Actually, so many workers from so many companies, so many issues, it overwhelmed the loose structure of the Knights of Labor. Remember that Missouri Pacific Railroad strike. Missouri Pacific was owned by a man named Jay Gould. He was upset he had to make any concessions to the labor union and swore he's going to take revenge against them at some point. Well, he had that opportunity the next year. The Texas and Pacific Railroad, Knights of Labor go on strike there. Gould does whatever it takes, pulls out all the stops to make sure the union is broken and he won strike. Well, the workers are crushed, the union is broken at the Texas and Pacific. Because of that, all the recriminations afterward, the Knights of Labor collapsed, disappeared within 10 years. Now, there are a couple of different types of labor unions here. There's industrial unions and there are trade unions. An industrial union is basically trying to unite all workers in all trades. So skilled or not all together in one big union. It's an industrial union. They can't everybody. A trade union is only organizing people in specific jobs. Specific For example, there's a carpenter union. That's a trade union made up only of carpenters. To name any kind of skilled profession, there's a labor union for it somewhere. The Electrical Workers Union, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Plumbers Union, Airline Pilots Union, Nurses Union, Teachers Unions, United Auto Workers, car manufacturers, Communications Workers of America, telephone workers, all organized in specific trades, specific trade unions. But these aren't the only strikes here. There are many others, and they're very violent. Case in point, Mattawan, West Virginia, 1920. The United Mine Workers had organized a strike of miners in Mattawan, West Virginia. Strikers walk out, they organize a tent city in and around the mine. They're protesting, they're picketing peacefully, demanding that the company agree to their demands, basically better pay, less hours, safer working conditions. People had men dying in cave-ins all the time. So instead of negotiating or talking with their workers, or even acknowledging the United Mine Workers, or just waiting them out, the company hires a few men to drive through in a car with machine guns to shoot at the women and children living in this tent city. People in the town, Mattawan, fought back. 10 people were dead, dozens wounded. And these kind of clashes are very common. Morewood, Pennsylvania, 1891. United Mine Workers goes on strike. 9 coal miners shot and killed by sheriff's deputies. Basically, the company owned the police department and told them to take out those miners. Mine workers striking for higher wages and an 8-hour workday. Company forced strikers and families from their homes on company-owned property, basically evicted all of them. Strikers marched on the company store. The strike went on for weeks to respond. So, maybe one of the most notorious, Ludlow, Colorado, 1914. Another mining strike. 1,200 coal miners go on strike in this little community of Ludlow. United Mine Workers' demands were a 10% wage increase, an 8-hour workday, payment for workers for laying a track and cutting wood for the job. Because basically, workers are only paid for how much coal they produce, but they're being forced to build a railroad and cut wood for the company too. They're not getting paid. They want the right to use any store, that is, not be forced just to shop in the stores owned by the mine. They want to be able to choose their own housing, choose their own doctors. Company response, and they called the Death Special. An armored car owned by the company, it went out and shot at the striking workers and their families. Workers had a tent city set up by the outside company property, women and children. Easter Monday, 1914, the companies attacked the strikers' tents with the Colorado National Guard. They killed 4 women and 11 children. They were hiding inside these tents. Shot at them, set others on fire. This can be called the Colorado Coalfield War. Strikes and conflicts across the state left between 70 and 200 dead. They don't know how many people died. Federal troops eventually disarmed both the mine companies and the miners both. Mine worker demands were not met. The company officials slowly implemented reforms. And the company organized the murder of those women and children. Not one was arrested. Nobody went to jail over that. That was the life of the American worker in 1914. That's why the United Mine Workers existed. Well, 1886, another unionist tried. Man, Samuel L. Gompers, he's a cigar maker. That's appeared to be a skilled job in 1886. Organizes his own union, the American Federation of Labor, called the AFL. AFL-CIO, that is the original American Federation of Labor. Got an alliance of craft unions. These trade unions organize only skilled laborers along craft lines, could better bargain for their crafts, avoiding politics, and working for specific objectives. Those objectives typically were things like higher wages, shorter hours, better working conditions. Union promised employers they would use strikes and boycotts only for modest gains. It would provide a stable workforce, not oppose monopolies, so long as they provide a reasonable wage for workers. Basically, telling the company, you're in the company any way you want, this is all we want. Just treat us right. Well, for a long, the American Federation of Labor became the most important labor group in the country, with membership rising from 140,000 in 1886 to 1 million members by 1901, 2 million by 1914. But of course, all these workers together, though, they recognize that no matter what contracts they won, what legislation they might have passed at the state level, they could lose all of it at any time. Employers would try to chip away at it, so once they won the strike or the contract, they recognized they had to keep going. Women rarely allowed to join unions. They feared that women could work for a lower wage that undermined the pay scales of men. So the Knights of Labor were the only major union organized. But there were a couple of AFL subsidiaries that allowed women in, such as the Typographical Union, as typists, and Cigar Makers Union. 1910, there's 6.3 million women working for wages in the United States, but only 125,000 belong to unions. And minorities were discouraged from the AFL from high initiation fees, technical examinations, and other means of many widespread competition for the races. Child labor. Between 1870 and 1900, the number of working children more than doubled to 1.8 million people. It's kids working in factories and mines. In 1900, some 10% of girls and 20% of boys aged 10 to 15 held jobs. Except child labor not entered the United States until 1938. And that's how you got your weekend off. Questions, comments? Okay, we'll finish up next time. Read chapters 20 and 21 in the book. No, we'll see. Anything else? See y'all next time.